This morning, we have a great opportunity. I have a friend visiting from New York to start us off on our journey with Jesus. It's Randy, his wife Kirsten, their daughter Esther. And I'm going to ask you to stand this morning. Randy is going to lead us in worship. And these are some pictures from way back yonder that are Randy and Kirsten when they met. What year was that?
2004.
Was Jesus on the journey then?
Yes, for me, just.
Just. That's them a little more recent. And then I think, is there another? There's a photo later on. So I am thrilled that you're here this morning. And please sing along if you would.
I've got a little cold, woke up yesterday morning, and so I'm going to be singing bass this morning. The other confession is I have never sung this song in public. It's one of my favorite songs. My wife comes on the radio, she says, "Could you turn that up?" Not really, and I think it's because it's the truth in my life that God is good all the time. It's kind of hokey, but sing along with me. God is good, yes he is. He's good all the time. God is good, you know he is. He's good all the time. You can search the whole world over, no greater friend you'll find. He's not good just once in a while. He's good all the time. Okay, that was the one where you learned it. Now you're going to sing it. God is good, yes he is. He's good all the time. God is good, you know he is. He's good all the time. You can search the whole world over, no greater friend you'll find. He's not good just once in a while. He's good all the time. Now we've all had friends who have let us down. You know what I'm talking about. At the very first sign of trouble, they're nowhere to be found. Well, Jesus stays when others go. He'll never leave your side. 'Cause he's your friend in stormy weather. 'Cause he's good all the time. Of course, you know it by now. God is good. Yes, he is. He's good all the time. Wait a minute. Nobody's clapping. Okay, this is a clapper. All right? Come on, clap with me. 2, 3, 4. God is good. Yes, he is. He's good all the time. God is good. You know he is. He's good all the time. You can search the whole world over. No greater friend you'll find. He's not good just once in a while. He's good all the time. He's the one you call in the middle of the night when your body moans with pain. Don't worry about that wayward son, 'cause he's heard you call his name. He'll put food in your kitchen when you haven't got a dime. 'Cause he's not good just once in a while. He's good all the time. Yes, God is good. Yes, he is. He's good all the time. God is good. You know he is. He's good all the time. You can search the whole world over. No greater friend you'll find. 'Cause he's not good just once in a while. He's good all the time. 'Cause he's not good just once in a while. He's good. And I mean, as a single parent, in the middle of the winter, when I'm driving to sell my guitar, to put 5 gallons of kerosene in my oil tank to keep my house warm, and I get 2 flat tires, on the way, so I had to call a friend to come and pick up the guitar so I could get kerosene to get home and get the heat on. God is good. Yes, He is. He's good all the time. God is good. You know He is. He's good all the time. You can search the whole world over. No greater friend you'll find. 'Cause He's not good just once in a while. And then there was that time, let's see, my daughter was 5, and we took her to the hospital for a stomach flu thing, and it ended up being a blood clot the size of a golf ball, and she needed emergency brain surgery. And then that happened 6 months later, and then 2 years later, and she had 3 brain aneurysms and 3 brain surgeries. He's not, and she's a parent today. That's scary. He's not good just once in a while. He's good all the time.
If you're visiting with us this morning, the beauty of what's happening is called casual excellence, and that's this. It's not about if the words on the slides were right. What it's about is the Spirit. And I am thrilled that Kirsten and Randy are here with us. Over the next X amount of weeks, we are going to be journeying together, and we want to give you stories along the way, because sometimes in the midst of our personal situations, we struggle to see the next step. We struggle to believe that Jesus is really with us on that journey. There's a verse in the book of John, and it's actually, click me, there you go. The thief comes only in order to steal, kill, and destroy. I have come in order that you might have life, life in all its fullness. These are the words of Jesus. I've had the privilege of walking with Randy and Kirsten on their journey. This is a vow renewal back in 2011 that I had the privilege of being involved with them. I believe their story has the power of influence. What I mean by that is you're not looking at a couple who has all their together. You're looking at a couple who depends on Jesus to take them day by day. So my prayer is that each one of us will receive something from them today that will allow us not only to grow deeper on our relationship, but maybe even climb out of a dark place, or for those of us who are maybe okay, to see how other people were used to bring them along on their journey. So I'd like to invite you up, Randy and Kirsten. This is their beautiful daughter, Esther, in the front row, who is just a little tyke. Oh, my goodness. This mic right here. So you just push this button right there.
Okay.
And your pictures will move forward.
Okay.
Did I not follow the words on the chart?
Let's just.
I'm terrible like that.
You had creative license.
Okay. Hi, I'm Kirsten.
Hi, Kirsten.
The picture on the right, that's us when we were just babies, when we first met. We met in 2004, so this is probably spring of 2005. And then this was just us a few weeks ago, after a foot of snow hit when we were out of town. So we had to go get our four-wheeler. But so we've been together for 14 years. This is our family. This was many years ago.
Count them. There's 7 there.
Yeah, that little tyke there is Esther, and holding her is her sister Allie. That's who Randy mentioned had the brain surgeries. And that's Michael and Aaron, me and Randy, Esther, Allie, Seth, Christian, and Cody, and that's our dog Grace, who passed away this year. We'll test you on the names at the end. Just kidding. Sometimes I can't remember all their names.
So we merged families.
Yeah.
I had 3 children. and she had 2. I had 4. I don't remember. I have to look at the chart. And then we had Esther together. And I think one of our stories is merging broken families. Yeah. And Kirsten will talk more about it. But our parenting styles were different. How we took care of our kids. I think our kids got along better than we did.
Yeah, they did.
Those early phases.
This picture is missing a few of the kids. These 2 pictures are from Father's Day. So this one, we're missing one of my boys. He was with his dad.
Michael.
And that little redhead is our very first granddaughter with Allie. So we have, well, I'll get to that in a minute. This is a true testament to the power of Christ in our lives.
That's my ex-wife in that picture.
This is her house.
Christmas Day with my ex-wife.
Yeah, we spent 3. I think we spent 3 Christmases with the families all together for the kids.
I think we did that mostly for the kids. We recognized, like, first of all, when we decided to get married and we started talking to our kids about it, they were like, "Oh, you got to invite Mom," and my wife's like, "She ain't coming to my wedding." So we decided the best thing to do was just to elope and show up one day and say, "We're married," which is what we did. So that started the phase where the kids didn't really understand, and Kirsten reached out to my ex-wife and said, "Hey, let's do Christmas together." And, it's not that close now, thankfully, because she's my ex-wife. But it was in the beginning, and she recognized the importance of blending our families together.
It was fun. It was hard, I'm not going to lie. But through it, April and I became friends, which is a little odd. We're not as close anymore because our lives have all taken different paths. But it was good for the kids. It really showed the kids the healing power of Christ in our lives. This next picture is really hard for me. This is Peyton, and I'll talk about him in a little bit. Peyton is one of 4 of our grandchildren, but Peyton is not a part of our lives now, but I'll get to that. It's not moving. There it goes. This is
how time goes by. They're the same boy. That's Michael in first spring, and that's Michael getting sworn into the U.S. Army in September.
So this is Esther's my baby girl. Michael's my baby boy. He'll always be my baby boy. I don't care how big he is now. And then this is little Esther, and then Esther just this summer. Oh, excuse me, sorry.
And she loves to sing. I can see her itching while I'm up here singing. I asked you before we came, and you're like, "Oh."
And then this running is a huge part of my life. It is an enormous prayer time for me. It's time alone for me and time to reflect. And then Randy started running with me here and there a couple years ago. And that's a picture of us. Esther captured this picture that we both love this. It's just such a metaphor for us in life, running side by side.
We're in step. Hey, before you move on to the next slide, I want to say that was her 5K in 2009. She finished that. I got a cough drop in my mouth, sorry. She finished that. She said, "I want to run a marathon now." And she did. She started training through the winter, and the next spring she went and ran a marathon.
Besides raising kids, it was the hardest thing I've ever done. But it was an amazing time for me of prayer and reflection, all those miles on the road. So we want to give you a little bit of our history. I grew up in a home that didn't go to church. We went to church on Christmas and Easter with my grandma. Not every year, but, you know, sorry. I'm working on getting over being sick all week. So Christ wasn't a part of my life. And in high school, I dated a guy that was part of a very, very large Catholic family. And I would occasionally go to church with them. I don't really remember much of it, but I remember one Christmas Eve going to the midnight mass. And even though I didn't understand everything that was going on, I feel like that is the start of my journey where God started to draw me to him. I don't think I accepted Christ then. I don't believe that I did. I don't believe that I understood any of that. But it opened my eyes. And throughout the years, I would seek out a higher purpose. But I didn't think I believed in God. I was one of those people that, you know, just felt like God was a fairy tale made up by men so that we could sleep better at night. I was very angry at this God that I didn't believe in because of suffering I had seen in my grandparents and paths that I chose to go down in my life. I blamed him. Really screwed up, I know, but that's just the way it was for me. And I had, through my 20s, life was challenging for me, and a lot of it was my own decisions. I had Michael when I had my first son when I was 18. I had my second son with my ex-husband when I think I was like early 20s. I don't remember exactly how old. And then within a month or so of after having Michael, I was very, very depressed, very depressed. I had really severe postpartum depression, and I spent all my time in bed. My mom would come over, and she would know to find me upstairs hiding in my room. Within a few months of having Michael, I found out I was pregnant again. And I could not cope with that. You know, I believed that if I had this baby, it was going to ruin my life. I believed that I would be trapped in this marriage that I didn't want to be in forever if I had this baby. And so my husband and I told him I wanted to have an abortion. And he agreed. He didn't fight me on it. He didn't come in with me or anything. He years later, said, well, he said it right when I walked back to the car, too. Said that he wished I hadn't done it. But he didn't say anything beforehand. It was right then that I felt my marriage was over. I had a really hard time with it at first, but I am somebody who, when something's upsetting me, I just stuff it down inside and shove it aside. And that's what I did. And I convinced myself I was okay with the choice, and it was a legal choice. I was allowed to do it, and I just stuffed it down, and I moved on. Little did I know that it was going to impact so much of my life. I had no clue at all.
Who did you tell other people over the years?
The only other person that knew was my best friend. That was it. Nobody else knew. Nobody.
When she went through an abortion recovery program, and I'd never known really she'd had an abortion, and she told me some of the statistics and the effect that having an abortion had on her. And I call it the walking dead because it killed a part of her inside. I mean, it was a decision she made, but you can go ahead and talk about it a little bit more if you want. But I didn't know. I mean, she just carried on like life was normal.
So I was separated quite a few years later. I was separated, and I was living on my own. I didn't have a car at the time. I was getting rides to work. My ex would bring the kids to me because I lived outside the school district. They didn't stay with me during the week, but they'd come all weekend. And my older son, Cody, was really, really angry. You know, his parents were separated. He was very angry. So we had a really, really rough weekend. Let me just back up 1 second. At work, I was surrounded by a few work friends that were Christians. And they had something that was drawing me. I wanted what they had. I wanted this peace that they seemed to have in this tumultuous world. I was really drawn to it. And I had started seeking. I had started researching, reading, listening to some music. Casting Crowns was huge influence in those early days for me, still are. And after a really, really rough weekend with the boys, they left, and I was in my room, and I'm sitting there, and I'm just like, I can't do this anymore. I just can't. I can't keep fighting with my kids. And I knew going back to my ex was not the answer for me then. So I'm laying there, and I was just like, God, if you're really there, if you're there, I need you. I need you to walk with me. I need you to help me. I can't do this. And I felt such an overwhelming mix of emotions. There was sadness and guilt and happiness and joy and peace, and all these things were just bubbling up inside of me. And I felt like Jesus was right there with me. And I felt like he was saying to me, it's okay now. You can rest. We'll do this together. I'm here with you. And the next day, people at work were like, are you okay? Because I was just flying high. I was on cloud nine. I felt such a joy that I had never in my life felt. And I'd love to say that, from that moment on, everything was great. But, this is life, and we're human. And it was funny because over the weeks and months after I accepted Christ into my heart, I was always like, okay, did I do it right? I didn't pray with somebody. Do I have to pray with somebody? And I'd be like, okay, God, I want you in my heart. And I would constantly be checking to make sure. It took me a while to be able to rest and trust in that. And some of that's my personality. I'm not an easily trusting person. So to fully rest in that took me a while. And it was a few months after I accepted Christ that I met Randy at a church that I was checking out. And it was a Wednesday night prayer service, and he was playing the guitar. And I have never experienced this before, but I was like, I need to know that man. And and
what a beautiful wife, huh?
And at that time,
short, older, bald men everywhere rejoice.
And at that time, I was I was a more aggressive person, so I pursued him. I wanted to know him, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to know him. And I'm glad I did.
So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm glad you did, too. Our first date was moving a couch. I needed help moving a couch. She goes, I'll help you. I'm like, okay. And I realized at that point in time, she was really good at help. You move furniture with some people that don't know how to move furniture. Some of you know what I'm talking about, right? Well, she knew. We kind of moved in motion, getting the furniture out, putting it in the truck, getting it up the flights of stairs into the house. We started working together. It was great right from the very beginning. And for some strange reason, we didn't have to pretend like being on dates and getting dressed up. And there was just a comfortableness between us that allowed us to be ourselves. Sometimes in the courtship phase, people will go through a dress-up phase where they're different. Well, I'm not all dressed up today either. But let me tell you my salvation story. I've been saved for 40 years. I was 19 when I got saved, and I was selling vacuum cleaners. And I had an appointment at this house, and I went to the house, and they were having a Bible study. And I walked in, and they said, well, can you wait till we're done? And I remember looking, there was like 4 families in the room thinking, maybe I can show it to all 4 of them at one time. Right? So they were talking about Jesus and about being born again. And I grew up always believing in God, never really thought about needing to ask him into my heart. And I listened to their talking and their study, and I'm kind of going over my script in my head. Wasn't really paying attention in the corner, but I was. And someone walked over to me and looked me right in the eye, and he said, would you like to ask Jesus into your heart? And my heart just exploded, like Kirsten said, with the joy and the grieving. And I was like, I don't even know if I talked, honestly. I didn't get down and bend my knee and pray some sinner's prayer at that point in time. But I left that house on fire for God, hungry for more of him. And like Kirsten said, many church services would come where they would give an altar call, and I would go down forward. God, I want to make sure. I was living, I was into drugs and alcohol. I was 19, and I can remember the first year I went to Bible study stoned all the time. That's journey with Jesus, right? That's the reality of my transition. And that's my salvation story. I believe God had an appointment with me. And I think that God may have an appointment with all of us at some point in time. Maybe that day would be today, too. Harden not your heart if you hear his voice. Some point during this sermon, if God is poking it, and you'll know it, because he's a nag. He'll nag at you in the background, right? Some of you know what I'm talking about. If God pokes you and says, hey, when they say, come forward for prayer, or they say, are there any of you that would like prayer for this, or was there anyone that wants to ask Jesus into their heart? It's the best decision you'll ever make. Those 40 years for me, and I know I don't look that old, right? Those 40 years for me, God is good all the time. You heard the story of my daughter and her brain surgeries and of selling my guitar to put fuel in the tank. But we all have testimony, and my testimony's 40 years long. There was a time when I did ministry full time, and I was behind in rent 2 weeks. And I woke up, and I was supposed to go do this coffee church service, and my car wouldn't start, and then my pants ripped. And I called the guy. I'm like, I can't come. He's like, well, you're going to be late. Come anyway. So I'm like, okay. And somehow I sprayed WD into my car and got it going and changed my clothes. And when I got there, the entire class gave their heart to Jesus. And the guy said, I don't know why I'm doing this, but God told me to just write a check and give you everything that's in my checking account. And it paid my bills and gave me a buffer. And I have a whole life of God's provision like that. A whole life. When we got married and we couldn't fit all those kids in our house, my wife's like, what's God going to do? Build 2 rooms? I said, well, you never know, he can. And well, he moved a few people out. I think that's what he did.
Yep. He gave us the 2 rooms we needed.
Yeah.
It was interesting merging our 2 families together because the kids, they all get along great. And they always have. It's been incredible. It's been us that have struggled merging our parenting styles together. When Esther was born, tension started to grow between us a little more. Our older daughter was in a bad relationship, and we both had our own views of how to handle this situation. And this is one of those areas, like I'll talk about submission in a minute, but this is one of those areas that I really should have listened to Christ and submitted to my husband. I didn't, and it was ugly. We fought like crazy. I mean, there was some scary fights, and we ended up in counseling with a fantastic counselor that showed us that some of our issues were from the past. Now, mind you, I still hadn't discussed with her my abortion. So to me, that was still a non-issue. That was something that happened and I had moved on.
Well, her father left her mother.
I was 6 months old.
When she was 6 months old. So she did not have a father. She had a father figure because her mother got remarried, but there was her father who, in her mind, never wanted her, didn't want to see her, and didn't reach out to her. Every once in a while, what she might tell you, at Christmas time or birthday time, it's like, hey, I love you, I'm your dad, and then he'd disappear. So she had deeper father issues, and I had probably deeper mommy issues. My mother was a dominant woman, and for some reason I was attracted to dominant women.
I'm very, very independent, very strong-willed. But through our marriage, God has shown me how I can be that person but still be submissive to my husband. Esther was a little over 2 years old, and we had gotten into a horrible, horrible fight. Horrible fight.
I think I threatened to call child services on her.
Because we were fighting, because we were yelling, and she was around. And he ended up going down to our older son's house. And that night, when we were arguing, we were so mad at each other, we couldn't even talk. We were texting with each other. It was ridiculous, really. But I was done. I was over. I didn't care if he came back or not. And then God gave me a vision of what Esther's life would look like without her father in it. And it crushed me. It just crushed me. Because I didn't want that for her. My boys my boys already were living that life. His kids were living that life. I didn't want that for her. And I really love him. I just didn't like him right then at all. And God also showed me that night that the change wasn't going to come from him. I couldn't change him. It wasn't my job to change him. I had to change me. I had to learn how to submit to him, and I hate that word, let me tell you. Because I was raised by a very strong mother. And in a boy's world, our house is dominated by males. And so to submit to a man was a very negative thing for me.
We've only got 10 minutes, and I want you to tell the Peyton story. I want to talk about submission.
I
Let me talk.
Okay.
Type into that. Because what that looks like for me is this. The other side to this door that swings both ways is, for me, I had to come to grips with the fact that my wife was smarter than me in lots of areas. And she was better at me in some things like organization, and paying the bills and administration. She was better, okay? And I'd been a single parent for a lot of years. I was used to doing it all myself. I'd get paid, I'd pay the bills, I'd put the rest in my pocket, and by the time I got paid, the next payday, she's like, you can't do that anymore. I'm like, you're not touching my money, right? Anybody that knows that you have a family, you have to work together. And for me, the other side of submission was I had to learn and understand the things she was good at and yield to her. And now I relax. We go on a trip. All I need is my driver's license and my credit card. That's all I need. Everything else is taken care of. It really brings peace to the family if you let your spouse be good at the things they're good at.
And he knows how hard that was for me, and he handles it very lovingly. We talk through everything together. We do not always agree. He doesn't always do what I think should be done, but I have learned that we have a much more peaceful home, and not because of him. There's an internal torment for me when I'm fighting against him, And I have learned, ladies, that if I want him to do something, I don't even tell him. I don't even go to him with it. I go right to the Lord with it. And I pray. And sometimes it'll be weeks, months later, and he'll be like, oh, I got this great idea. Thank you, God. Because he works on Randy's heart. And I have found that for us, it just works better if I take things that I know are going to be a conflict between us, and if I take them to the Lord first. It's not always easy.
Amen. And the journey with Jesus, you know, we're sitting up here, a husband and wife team, and we're born again, and Jesus lives in our hearts. And we're telling you our testimonies and our stories. But again, I want to say, I know that those of you sitting there, many of you, you could just as easily be sitting here and telling your stories and telling your testimony. Your testimonies are being written even right now. And through those periods of time when God has provided supernaturally in our lives, there was also grief, and there was fear and anxiety. I mean, we talk about God is good all the time. He is. But that doesn't mean that when you're in the midst of a hard place, you don't feel anxious, you don't worry, you're not in pain. Because they're all there too. It's not all smiles. So today, if you're in the midst of a hard place, whatever that hard place is, God is writing your story. I would encourage you to just endure. Look at the things he's accomplished in your life behind you and know that he will accomplish yet again. Just endure. Okay, we have 7 minutes. What do you want to talk about?
So one of the huge things that God has done for me was, like I said, I had an abortion back in 1997. And I lived with it for many, many years without realizing the impact it had on me. When Esther was born, her father couldn't go from Owego to Binghamton with her without me in the car. I would freak out if he even tried to go to the store. I knew I had a loving God. I knew I had a forgiving God. But I didn't have any kind of forgiveness in my heart for my abortion. But I didn't realize that that was causing the terror that I was having of having my daughter out of my sight. Like, I knew God loved me, and I knew he gave me this gift of my daughter, but I was terrified that if she was out of my sight, he would take her from me. And it really was a subconscious thing. I didn't realize this till later, that that's what was going on for me. And this man is so grace-filled. I'd be like, no, you can't go visit your mom because I don't feel good and I don't want to go, and you can't go without me. And he'd be like, okay, this isn't normal, but all right. He didn't understand it then, but he accepted it, and I'm so grateful for that. And it was shortly after Esther was 2. It was like she was probably about 2.5, and I was asked to do a project for a local Christian pregnancy center in Binghamton. And as I'm driving up there, he says to me, he goes, you know, if they want to talk to you, or if you feel pushed to talk about your abortion. And I started sobbing. I'm like, I'm not talking about my abortion. I'm fine. That's behind me. I'm not discussing it with them. Well, I walked out of there raw. I brought up my abortion as part of our general conversation. And I realized right then and there I needed help, that it was something that was eating me up. And I felt alone. I felt like I was the only person in the world that had had an abortion and had suffered. And the ladies there were incredible. They had an abortion recovery Bible study, which I had no idea something like that even would exist. And they walk you through step by step through the healing process, through the forgiveness. It is something that has changed my life. It's changed my relationship with my children. I don't have time to talk about it the way I wanted, but Michael and I had a horrible relationship because I had an abortion, so his father took him, per se. I mean, we were still together, but any decision I wanted to make about him, his father's like, no, I'm going to do this. He controlled everything with Michael because and he told me this later, he felt like I'd taken away one kid, he wasn't letting me take away another one. And I had a lot of anger and resentment towards him, but I put it towards my son. So we had a really ugly relationship until God spoke to me again and said, you need to change. You can't change your son because his father had filled him with lies. You can't change him. You have to change you. And it was the second time that he had said that to me that it changed my life fundamentally. Michael and I have a phenomenal relationship now. I'm his go-to person. He's my baby. And God walking with me through each of these times, he continues to grow me and to change me and to make me a better mom and wife and woman and daughter of Christ. And Peyton, the picture of the grandbaby. Peyton was born in 2013. He was our son's girlfriend's baby. We were told that our son Seth was the father. She had a very difficult life and didn't have custody of any of her children. So they asked us, social services asked us to take Peyton into our home.
Our son Seth is disabled. He has Asperger's disease. And the mother was not a stable person, so social services was looking for a home for him.
So 3 days old.
Him.
3 days old, we brought this little baby home into our lives. And I tried to tell myself that I could bring him in, love him, and then let him go when they were ready for him to be wherever he needed to be. And he lived with us for 7 months. 7 months. It was a very, very, very difficult time. She was pulling us all over the place with visitation. The courts took her side through everything. And I just kept praying. I just kept praying for God to give us a clear path.
We had a paternity test done, and it wasn't even Seth's son after all.
And Randy started asking the hard questions about how could we get custody of this child? And because social services took him away from her incorrectly, we would never be able to have custody.
We wanted to adopt him, and by now he was my wife's son, per se, because you bring a baby home at 3 days old, and he was one of our own kids by then. But he was never going to be one of our own kids, and the mother and social services let us know that. We were just temporary parents.
I prayed and prayed and prayed for God to bring him to God to put him in our lives permanently. And even though it shattered me when I had to hand him over. I didn't stop crying for days.
She would go into the supermarket and
hide.
have a panic attack. And I have to say at this point in time that we're a story in process, and I don't think you've even healed fully from that. And it's not always roses when you get up and give your testimony. Sometimes you're right in the middle of something going on, and I think that Peyton is still there. Kirsten will tell you that, not that she lost her trust in God, but I don't know if she's angry at God. I don't know what the story is. You have to wait for the sequel. But Peyton hurt deep. So we've got 8 seconds left. Is that till the service is over? Should I start a song or?
Let me. Where I do see God in the story with Peyton is I had gotten fairly close to the social worker, the foster liaison that worked between social services and the mother and us. She's a really, really wonderful woman. And the day they took Peyton, the family he was placed with were brand new foster parents. They had been going through training this whole time that Peyton was with us. they had been going through training. When they came and picked him up, it was a huge deal to them. The mother-in-law, the grandmas, they came with the family. So I find great rest, and I have reached out to her, the social worker, many times, those first few months, and then after year anniversary and 2-year anniversary, and the last couple years I haven't. But she told me that of all of the kids that she has any interaction with, when she puts her head on her pillow at night, she feels safe in his love and security. And this family has adopted him, which is why even though on legal paperwork we're listed as family, we've let him go so that he can live the life that they can give him. It is a difficult place for me. I withdrew from God at the end of this period. I mean, I was angry. I was angry at my husband. I was angry at God. I'm much more at peace. It still hurts me. It's still raw. Every year on his birthday, every year on the day they took him from us, those feelings still hurt. And while we were preparing for this weekend, one of the things that I came to realize, was that I haven't opened my heart back up to God yet because I'm afraid. I'm afraid of what he's going to ask me to do next. I'm afraid of what he's going to ask me to open my heart to. And I realized doing that this week, I'm not just hurting myself by staying in this place that I'm in, but I'm also hurting whoever God may want me to interact with or whatever he may ask me to do. So I'm really grateful that you asked us to come here, even though, it scares me to death. Because it gave me an awareness to where I am and what I need to start really looking at. Because I love Christ. He's a daily part of my life. I just have been keeping him at arm's length.
So, is it time to sing the ending song? My life verse, if you could have something called that, is out of 2 Corinthians chapter 1, and it says, "Comfort those with the comfort that you yourselves have received." And as I sing this song, and you'll know it, those of you, please sing with me. I just want to say today, if you desire comfort anywhere, reach out. That might be all by yourself sitting there. I'm not going to say stand up and make a fool of yourself or come down front. The altar will be open. Pastor Sal loves to pray for people. He's a powerful, we've got a good pastor. We miss him. He's like, well, then drive. Maybe. Anyway, the altar will be open, and I would say to you that I remember one time I was sitting in a church service, and I was saved, and somebody gave an altar call, and God was saying, go on down front. A church of about 1,000 people. I was way up in the balcony, and God saying, go on down front. And I'm like, that's not God, I'm saved. And it was so persistent. Finally, it's like God said, well, what's it going to cost you? Your pride? I'm like, fine. So I walked all by myself, the only one that went forward. And when I got there, I bawled like a baby. I needed to be at the altar. I needed to submit to God. So as I sing this song and you sing with me, if God is calling you just for peace in your storm, whether that storm is financial or physical or relationship, yield to him. He is the Prince of Peace. When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrow like sea billows roll, Stand with me. I got to stand. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul. One more time. Receive that peace. It is well with my soul. It is well. It is well with my soul.
Thank you, Kirsten. Thank you, Randy. Some of you may want to speak with Kirsten after. Maybe if you want to grab her number, she can help direct you if you need. But I believe wholeheartedly that what you saw today, what you heard, is really a snapshot of how Jesus works. We don't get to perfection. We don't stop struggling. We just have somebody to turn to on the journey. Let's pray. God, I do thank you and praise you for the story of your goodness in their lives, of how you've taken this family, crazy, wild family, and you have brought them to the foot of the cross. And as a result, they've been able to journey with you. I ask, Father, that every person here today who has heard this, that God, you would touch their hearts. That if there's someone who needs to take that next step, that Father, you would continue to woo and to draw. And I ask for safety as we travel home, and we thank you for your love and your grace. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. God bless, and have a beautiful rest of your Sunday.